The year is 1554. At the age of 16, Lady Jane Grey was preparing for her own execution. She blindfolded herself and put her head on the block. Only 6 months ago, she was the Queen of England for 9 days. Her successor, Mary I, accepted the Privy Council's advice and ordered Jane and her husband's execution. How did Mary, the first Queen of England, become so disliked by the public? Mary was born on the 18th of February 1516 at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, England. She was the only child of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, to survive infancy. Before Mary's birth, 4 previous pregnancies had resulted in stillborn daughters and 3 short-lived or stillborn sons. Despite his affection for Mary, Henry was deeply disappointed that his marriage had produced no sons. By the time Mary was 9 years old, it was apparent that Henry and Catherine would have no more children, leaving Henry without a legitimate male heir. Disappointed at the lack of a male heir and eager to remarry, Henry attempted to have his marriage to Catherine annulled, but Pope Clement refused his request. Henry claimed that the marriage was unclean because Catherine was the widow of his brother Arthur. Catherine claimed that her marriage to Arthur was never consummated and so was not a valid marriage. The Pope issued a dispensation on that basis. Henry sent Catherine to live away from court, and Mary was not permitted to see her mother. In early 1533, he married Anne Boleyn and formally declared the marriage with Catherine void. Henry repudiated the Pope's authority, declaring himself supreme head of the Church of England. Catherine was demoted to Dowager Princess of Wales, and Mary was deemed illegitimate. Mary determinedly refused to acknowledge that Anne was the Queen or that her daughter Elizabeth was a princess, further enraging King Henry. Although both she and her mother were ill, Mary was refused permission to visit Catherine. When Catherine died in 1536, Mary was inconsolable. In 1536, Queen Anne fell from the king's favour and was beheaded. Elizabeth, like Mary, was declared illegitimate and stripped of her succession rights. Within 2 weeks of Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour, who urged her husband to make peace with Mary. Henry insisted that Mary recognise him as head of the Church of England, repudiate papal authority, acknowledge that the marriage between her parents was unlawful, and accepted her own illegitimacy. Reconciled with her father, Mary resumed her place at court. In 1537, Queen Jane died after giving birth to a son, Edward. Mary was made godmother to her half-brother. Over 1539, the king's chief minister negotiated a potential alliance with the Duchy of Cleves. A match between Henry and the Duke's sister Anne was agreed. When the king saw Anne for the first time in late December 1539, a week before the scheduled wedding, he found her unattractive but was unable, for diplomatic reasons and without a suitable pretext, to cancel the marriage. Anne consented to the annulment of the marriage, which had not been consummated, and the chief minister was beheaded. In 1542, following the execution of Henry's 5th wife, Catherine Howard, the unmarried Henry invited Mary to attend the royal Christmas festivities. At court, while her father was between marriages and thus without a consort, Mary acted as hostess. In 1543, Henry married his 6th and last wife, Catherine Parr, who was able to bring the family closer together. Henry returned Mary and Elizabeth to the line of succession through the Third Succession Act, placing them after Edward, though both remained legally illegitimate. Henry VIII died in 1547, with Edward succeeding him. As Edward was still a child, rule passed to a regency council dominated by Protestants, who attempted to establish their faith throughout the country. Mary remained faithful to Roman Catholicism and defiantly celebrated traditional Mass in her own chapel. She repeatedly refused Edward's demands that she abandon Catholicism. On the 6th of July, 1553, at the age of 15, Edward VI died of a lung infection, possibly tuberculosis. He did not want the crown to go to Mary because he feared she would restore Catholicism and undo their father's reforms, and so he planned to exclude her from the line of succession. His advisers told him that he could not disinherit only one of his half-sisters. He would have to disinherit Elizabeth as well, even though she was a Protestant. Contradicting the Act of Succession 1544, Edward named Lady Jane Grey, the granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister Mary, as his successor. On the 10th of July 1553, Lady Jane was proclaimed Queen. By the 12th of July, Mary and her supporters had assembled a military force at Framlingham Castle, Suffolk. Lady Jane's supporters collapsed as she was deposed on the 19th of July. She was imprisoned in the Tower of London with her husband. Mary rode triumphantly into London on the 3rd of August 1553 on a wave of popular support. She was accompanied by her half-sister Elizabeth and a procession of over 800 nobles and gentlemen. One of Mary's first actions as Queen was to order the release of the Roman Catholic leaders from imprisonment in the Tower of London. Now aged 37, Mary turned her attention to finding a husband and producing an heir, which would prevent the Protestant Elizabeth from succeeding to the throne. Her first cousin, Charles V of Spain, suggested she marry his only illegitimate son, Philip. The Spanish prince had been widowed a few years before by the death of his first wife. The English House of Commons unsuccessfully petitioned Mary to consider marrying an Englishman, fearing that England would be relegated to a dependency of the Habsburgs. When Mary insisted on marrying Philip, insurrections broke out. Thomas Wyatt, the younger, led a force from Kent to depose Mary in favour of Elizabeth, a part of the wider conspiracy now known as Wyatt Rebellion, which also involved the Duke of Suffolk, Lady Jane's father. Mary declared publicly that she would summon Parliament to discuss the marriage. If the marriage was not to the kingdom's advantage, she would refrain from pursuing it. On reaching London, Wyatt was defeated and captured. Wyatt, the Duke of Suffolk, Lady Jane, and her husband were executed. Elizabeth, though protesting her innocence in the Wyatt affair, was imprisoned in the Tower of London for 2 months, then put under house arrest. Mary and Philip's wedding took place at Winchester Cathedral just 2 days after their first meeting. Philip could not speak English, and so they spoke a mixture of Spanish, French, and Latin. In September 1554, Mary stopped menstruating. She gained weight and felt nauseated in the mornings. For these reasons, almost the entirety of her court, including the physicians, believed she was pregnant. Through May and June, the apparent delay in delivery fed gossip that Mary was not pregnant. Mary continued to exhibit signs of pregnancy until July 1555, when her abdomen receded. It was most likely a false pregnancy, perhaps induced by Mary's overwhelming desire to have a child. In August, soon after the disgrace of the false pregnancy, which Mary considered God's punishment for her having tolerated heretics in her realm, Philip left England to command his armies against France in Flanders. Mary was heartbroken and fell into a deep depression. She had issued a proclamation that she would not compel any of her subjects to follow her religion, but by the end of September 1553, leading Protestant churchmen were imprisoned. Mary rejected the break with Rome her father instituted and the establishment of Protestantism by her brother's regents. Around 800 rich Protestants fled into exile. Those who stayed and persisted in publicly proclaiming their beliefs became targets of heresy laws. The first executions occurred over 5 days in February 1555. In total, 283 were executed, most by burning. The burnings proved very unpopular with the public. Mary persevered with the policy, which continued until her death and exacerbated anti-Catholic and anti-Spanish feeling among the English people. She was weak and ill from May 1558. In pain, possibly from ovarian cysts or uterine cancer, she died on the 17th of November 1558, aged 42, during an influenza epidemic. She was succeeded by Elizabeth.